Hi, everyone. Here we are. It is Tuesday, and that means it's association chat time. I am so excited to talk with you today because we have an awesome guest, I was actually just hearing somebody talk about this use of the word awesome the other day. It's a popular topic. People hate, it seems, when there's this overuse of the word awesome, but I really think it applies in this case. We have an awesome guest. We have an awesome topic. And so, welcome to Association Chat this week. Now, a little bit different than usual because I don't usually ask this at the beginning, but if you are watching this, this is streaming to a number of places. I would love for you to type in your name, type in where you're watching this from, and share also your favorite beverage. Let's find out a little bit about you while we're going along. I myself love tea and coffee. I have two of those situations going on right here. It's Earl Grey, if you must know. So, here we go. As you type these in, I want to find out more about you. Welcome to Association Chat. This is your online discussion where we warm ourselves by the virtual fire with thought leaders and trailblazers alike to join up in this online home for the association community. I'm the host of Association Chat, Kiki L'Italien. And before we get started, I just want to say thank you. Thank you to the awesome Patreon patrons who support Association Chat and help make it happen. You truly just keep the wheels on and keep the inspiration flowing. And I personally really appreciate it. And I'm sure everyone else who enjoys Association Chat appreciates it too. So if you want to support, visit patreon.com/association chat. And now let's move on to the show. So today we're taking a look at online community. And I don't know about you, but I've spent a lot more time inside this past year than I ever anticipated. And I apparently am not alone. There are a lot of people who have been spending more time inside and not traveling or traveling as much as they used to. And maybe you've become more active and less of a lurker in some of your online communities. Maybe you've participated in some new online social media platforms like Clubhouse and given those a test run. Maybe you've just found that you've relied a lot more in your online communities than you ever did before. Many have. And in fact, the online community platform Higher Logic, I'm going to share this little stat with you. They shared in a report in late 2020 at the beginning of the pandemic, quote, we saw 81% of our customers get a significant uptick in online community engagement. And since March, we've seen a 33% increase in usage and new members across our platforms. So associations have been built around this concept that they exist to serve and support members who support a common mission or a common goal. And as we move past a year in which associations were forced to move a lot of this engagement online, a lot of member interactions online and into a virtual environment, what does that mean? What does that mean for the state of online community in 2021? Well, to help answer that question, I have the perfect person, and that is Marjorie Anderson. Marjorie Anderson is an online community strategist who specializes in building community in the association and nonprofit space. She is the founder of Community by Association, which is an organization committed to the advancement of community professionals in associations and nonprofits. She's also the product manager for community at Project Management Institute, a professional membership association shaping the project management industry. And with that, yes, hi. I am
Hello.
so glad you're here. It's so good to see you.
It's good to see you too, always.
Oh my gosh. I mean, it's so I feel like, I use the word awesome maybe a few too many times, but I truly mean in your case, every single time it is so worth it because the work that you've been doing with Community by Association and just for communities in general for so many years, it's just been really stellar and something that I think a lot of people look up to, including myself, So I'm glad that you're here. And I wanted to start off by framing the conversation a little bit for people who are joining us and saying, well, what do you mean by community? What do you mean by online community? There are a lot of different types. So for our conversation today, how would you define the word community?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think when we talk about communities, it's important to make the distinction between online communities that you build on social media platforms, like with Association Chat, the Facebook group there, versus social media in and of itself. So when we're talking about communities, we're talking about online spaces that people are gathering to talk about a shared interest, to share ideas, gain knowledge, get connected to one another. Um, Social media is more of a megaphone to me. It's more of an audience generator. It's less about we and more about me. I heard Patrick O'Keefe say that one time that social media is more about me and communities are more about we, like building up the collective. So when we talk about community for the sake of this conversation, we are talking about those spaces in which people can come together to share ideas, exchange knowledge, make connections with one another, to further the profession that they're in, to help others with the same interests, whether that's knitting, whether that's sports, whatever that looks like. That's what we mean when we say online communities.
Well, I mean, I think that that's really helpful just because, I know that people seem to get a lot of the social media stuff confused because sometimes it is your online community that you're talking about, but sometimes it's not. And I know that recently, there's been some interesting research that's been coming out. I know Facebook, in February, they released some information about online community, which I thought was really interesting. And I know that you took a look at as well. But before we even talk about the research, let's just talk about this past year a little bit. COVID-19 hit and really, yeah, it did. It's in the middle. We're in the middle of it. And I think a lot of community managers suddenly saw this big uptick in engagement because not only were more people available to visit and interact online, but a lot of the other ways that they could engage were completely knocked out. What are some of the things that you noticed in the communities that you've managed and that you sort of participate in and oversee in regards to how COVID-19 has impacted online community?
Yeah, so it's interesting the way COVID has turned people to online spaces more so than they ever have before. When COVID initially hit, I know one of the things that we talked about in my organization was, okay, now how are we going to get people involved? How are we going to make sure that we keep people engaged? And where other areas saw a decline in participation, the participation in our online community shot through the roof.
Yeah.
We saw record numbers of returning users. We saw record numbers of people wanting to submit content and create with each other. It was amazing because I think people were looking for some way to stay connected. And so organizations have really kind of turned to online communities to bolster engagement among members, event attendees, volunteers, what have you. So these online community programs are stretched, right? Because community
Mhm.
managers are being asked to do more with less. It's a lot of hard work to build a community. It's not just about standing up a platform and making sure that people can, talk to one another in the forums. At the end of the day, you're building a relationship with the people in this online community. That doesn't happen overnight. So we're seeing organizations now not only say, okay, we need online community in order to help with keeping people engaged for our virtual events, but it's also how do we build these subgroups to continue to bring people together when we can't have face-to-face meetings, when we can't have face-to-face events. And so while you may have the people there that generally come to those face-to-face meetings, whether they be board meetings or volunteer meetings or item writing sessions or whatever that looks like, you still have to create the space to where they can collaborate and feel safe in doing so, and feel like their contributions are still valued, even though they can't get on a plane and go to a great destination in order to do that. So that's additional burden and additional pressure on a community manager when resources may be scarce. So not only are you now responsible for managing this community for your initial members, but then you're also responsible for making sure that the rest of the organization is able to build community as well. That's not always in the strategy, right? That's not always a part of how you continue to move your community forward. So not only now is this community manager having to think of how am I going to do this with one hand, with just two hands in some cases, because sometimes community teams are a team of one. But now, how do I strategize for the long term? Because this can't just be something that we stand up right now and never do again. You're enabling people to do something in a way that they've never done it before. You have to think about what the future of that looks like as well. So, it's additional brain power, it's additional manpower, for lack of a better word, and we're not always getting those resources in order to get that work done.
It's been years and years that people who work with online communities have been struggling to sort of prove the worth of the time spent in online community. And, there's a really weird power dynamic that happens with that because I think in the Facebook report, they call it there are a lot of accidental leaders, but, people who find themselves in this community manager role, a lot of the times they become sort of this spokesperson for the group, but they're also this diplomat that is going back and forth. And always, if they're doing their job, always making people feel safe, making people feel like, they have a place where they can share and that they belong. And also being the policeman and like coming in and trying to police to make sure that while people feel safe to share their ideas, and there can be differing ideas, that no one is feeling like the place isn't being monitored and cared for. And with that, especially I feel like in associations, with that, it hasn't always matched out to either what people are paid for that role or the support that they've had, because it takes so much time and energy and resources to do that effectively. And to your point, as more and more people turn to these online sources, I mean, that's that many more people that you're interacting with. That's that many more people that you're trying to provide answers to, content for, point in the right direction, all of these different things. And add to that, with COVID-19 making people ask a lot of questions in at least the association industry and in the events industry, and with the political, sort of stuff that we've been going through in the United States, there's been an awful lot for community managers to try to accomplish, especially in this past year. Are you hearing, and I, that's a big lead up for this question, but with all of that said, are you hearing in the community management circles talk about what this means for this role? Because I think it's very hard to not witness and just see it demonstrated how important a role like community manager really is.
Yeah. So what I think I'm seeing, and hearing is that people understand that it's a heavy lift for even just for one person, and that we need to restructure the way that we think about the role.
Mhm.
It's not just someone who comes in and posts on Facebook all day. That's not a community manager. There's a bunch of stuff that goes into that. There's strategy development. There's data analytics. There's user design. There's a whole bunch of stuff that falls underneath that. And so what I'm seeing across the board is that there are more roles with the title of head of community,
Mhm.
director of community, VP of community. But when you drill down into what those role descriptions look like, what I'm seeing is it's head of community for XYZ company in some cases. And then at the bottom or in the description, it's build the marketing communication strategy for our products.
Right.
Build build. So I think that I think it's still being viewed as something that is supplementary to some other larger role. Still, we need someone to manage the community, but they can do all this other stuff too.
Mm.
No, it is a dedicated full-time role that demands additional resources.
Yeah.
And I think that some organizations get that. And I think that some either don't still get it or don't have the funds in order to resource for it properly. So it continues to be something that someone does off the side of their desk in addition to their normal day job. So I think there will eventually be an evolution where organizations get it and they're like, yeah, this really needs the dedication, the resources, the pay for all that goes into what this role actually is. And then I think there also needs to be a normalization of what these roles are, right? So what is a community manager versus a community moderator versus a community analyst versus a director of community versus a VP of community? So I think that there are different levels along the spectrum of this role that need to be defined, but we're starting to try to figure that out.
Well, and on this topic, so Facebook user, I can't see your name on StreamYard, but man, I can't wait to go find out. And just thank you for asking this great question. Facebook user says, on this topic, what are some ways you can prove value, ROI, for having communities? I think that's a roadblock for many associations when justifying the cost, both for the software as well as the power and effort needed to come from a manager. Great question.
Yeah. So this one, I always, I tend to think of it in a couple of ways. And I think the first way that you prove out the ROI of your community is not just with numbers. I think there's some great ROI calculators out there that help you prove, what percentage of time is saved, what percentage of calls were deflected and all that great stuff. But I think at the end of the day, you have to be able to tell a story around those numbers. So if you are able to show the impact your community is having across the business based off of the activities that you're participating in, that's key. And so what do I mean by that? Many times we community managers get in our community management bubble and we have our community and we're like, this is what I'm managing. It's this stuff right here. People are talking. Questions are getting answered. What do you mean you don't understand the value? Across the organization, though, what are you doing? Are you collaborating with, say, your chapter development department to help bring people together online and then get them to a chapter meeting? Are you collaborating with your events department to start the conversation online to then get people to a face-to-face event whenever those come back? Where are you having ties across the organization where community work was integral to completing a business goal? That is where you're going to find your value. And it doesn't have to be gigantic and enormous. It doesn't have to be all of the things, but you should be having conversations across the business to figure out what pain points exist and where your community can be an aspirin solution or a vitamin solution. Aspirin solution, is it something that's absolutely vital to helping another part of the business complete a goal? Or vitamin solution, is it nice to have, or is there some other way that they can complete those goals? You find those areas where you can be an aspirin solution to the rest of the business, collaborate with them on achieving a business goal, and then you report out on the impact that community had in achieving that goal. And that is how you prove your ROI. And so that's how you really create the value for your community program there. You have to come out of your community management bubble, because at the end of the day, community is about collaboration. It's about bringing people together. For us to create our programs in a silo is counterintuitive as community managers.
Yeah.
So let's think about the bigger picture. And it doesn't have to feel as heavy as it sounds. Find one or two areas where you can really make an impact, make that impact and report out on it. Show the value that you brought to another program while also bringing the value to the people who engage in your online community on a regular basis, and show that. And then as you continue to participate in those activities, as you continue to strategize in that way, and have a little bit of mental gymnastics about how you will create programming, how you will create enablement through your online community for the rest of the organization, then that value is realized and it's easy to show because it's like no brainer. Without community, we wouldn't have been able to do this work.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you brought up something early on that I won't say I was triggered, but I mean, almost, right? And it's are you collaborating with your like events team? And I thought, okay, if there's one thing that not only have I been asked to speak about, but like answer questions about, it's the role that community can play with online events. Oh my gosh, suddenly now that everyone's having the virtual conference, they want to figure this out, right? Like, what's the tie? How can they keep the people who are engaging in their online virtual events engaging with them after that, right? Where's the on ramp to this community that associations and different organizations have? I imagine you've been hearing the same sort of thing quite often over the past year.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
How do we get people back?
Maybe we should build a relationship with them that's longer than one event. Yeah, yeah. So, what are you saying to people who ask you about that? Because I do get the feeling that people, of course, the quick and dirty. How can I quickly make this work for this event that's coming up in 2 weeks? And but building a relationship takes longer than that. And it's like, what would be the first steps that you've been giving people in how to think about that situation?
Yeah, I think it's as simple as starting the conversation online before you even think about creating your event, right? So
Mhm.
if you know that you're going to have a virtual event in 6 months, start the conversation within the online community. Get speakers in there, talking to people, answering questions. Don't get them in there to boost their session. That's not what they're there for. But what they are there for is to help people get answers to their questions. So get your speakers in there, get them talking to the rest of the community. And then maybe a couple of months out, why don't you hold a webinar within the online community for a sneak peek for the event, or create a group within the community where attendees can come and start to have some special perks that they get as part of the online community, as part of attending this virtual event, in that group, right? And so
Mhm.
you're starting to build that rapport with them in that conversation, and build excitement, and in some cases FOMO, for this event that's coming up, that you don't want people to miss out on. Event happens, bing, bang, boom, all the things go off wonderfully without a hitch. Get them back into the community to continue the conversation. Have, ask the expert style conversations with your speakers. Keep them engaged within the online community. Go in and thank the participants, provide them a digital swag bag that they can only get if they're a part of if they're a part of the group within the online community. All those types of, I mean, those are things that you can do to build relationships and get people excited about attending a virtual event. And not only that, it's not just about the event. Then they've got a place to go to talk with each other after this event's gone on. They can tell other people
Yes.
what happened. They can talk to one another. And, oh, did you go to so and so's event? That was really, or a session that was really great. I'd like to talk some more about that. They're connecting in your world, in your space. They're not going off
Yes.
to LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever to find those people, because you're creating a home for them to do it all in one area, in one space. And it's with you. You've created that value for them. And so if you think about the whole, attendee life cycle and what that could look like, you should be building that into the experience, both within the online community and your virtual event.
I just love that response, because you touched on the piece about community that I think gets lost a lot of times, and that is, it's not just about driving the traffic to the site. And even getting them on there and listening to whatever content you're sharing. It's about getting them to engage with each other. You have, that is where the community part of it really takes off, is if they are communicating with each other. And it's so fascinating to me that that is a piece that is not focused on more often. Sometimes it's just brushed past completely. And I'm like, well, where are they engaging with each other? Not like back and forth with the speaker, but like each other. How are you
Mhm.
making it easy for them to feel comfortable talking with the other person, And that doesn't always seem to, I don't know, like rise up to the top of what people are thinking about when they're looking at that online community/event connection.
Yeah, I think one of the things that happens, right, is that organizations are like, I spent a lot of money on this platform. So all I have to
Yeah.
do is give
Yes.
them the space to show up. That's like saying if I build a house, there's gonna be furniture and stuff, and I'll just go there and I'll be all set.
Yeah.
And that's not the case.
Yeah.
You need to be able to figure out ways to enable those connections with people. You're not there to like make people do the thing. You're there to help provide the mechanisms to which they can and make them feel safe doing it, right?
Yeah.
Like you're
Yeah.
not there to be like, get in there and talk to each other. It's not how it works.
I know. I do feel like sometimes that's what community managers are being asked to do, like, go generate some activity. Well, I mean, they're people. They have
Right.
they free will and all of that. But it is kind of funny that's sort of the request that I think a lot of people have. I mean, the community managers are amazing, and there are a lot of I would say they seem like they have a lot of superpowers, but even then, there's only so much you can do legally, to like without forcing people to do the thing you want them to do. So I don't know. I had mentioned the research before, and the reason I wanted to go in that direction is not just to get your take on some of the research that's come out recently, but also to hear about some research that you're undertaking as well. So, can we go there? Can we talk about that a little bit?
Sure, absolutely.
All right. So, first of all, tell me, like, what is some of before we jump into the research that you're undertaking right now, um, you know, Facebook community roundtable. What are some of the things that people need to know about as far as community and community engagement, research wise, that they need to keep an eye on right now?
Yeah. So, a lot of the research that has been coming out lately has been really, really thoughtful in the way that it presents its findings. So, Community Roundtable always has really great research. If you guys have ever, for those of you who are watching, if you've ever had the opportunity to take a look at the SOCM research, with State of Community Management research that they put out, it's pretty compelling. They generally put good information about what they're seeing in online communities, from internal communities to B2B communities to B2C communities, and they kind of squish that information together to show, okay, this is what's working, this is where we're missing the mark, and here are next steps for both community managers and for executives.
Mhm.
And then also CMX put out a community trends report that really kind of helped show what's happening from a community landscape across the board. So what are the things that are cropping up for organizations and for communities across the board, and what are the things that we should be paying attention to in the long haul, right? So one of the big things that came out of that report was how people are engaging around virtual events and how they'll want to in
Mhm.
the future, right? Like now that we've opened this gate, how important is community to ensuring that we can still provide great virtual event experiences into the future. And then this last one that came out from GovLab was really interesting to me because yes, it took a look at some of the trends, but it also really took a look at what are the things that people need to
Mhm.
participate in online communities, and then what are the outputs of feeling safe in an online community space, of being able to show up authentically in community space. How does it create leaders? And those things are less about good metrics and good strategy, and more about community culture and design. So I think these are the types of things that the community industry are going to really start showing in terms of their research, because there's a ton of stuff out there that will tell you how to create good metrics. There's a ton of stuff out there that's going to tell you how to set up your user guidelines, and which communities who've got executive buy-in, how well are they doing versus those that don't. But when you really look at how are we architecting the community experience and designing it in such a way that provides a culture that breeds people participating more, that's the type of stuff you want to look at. That's the type of stuff that I'm hoping the future of the research that comes out of the community industry will continue to highlight, because I think that in and of itself is really kind of the magic piece that we're missing a little bit.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm hoping to see come out, and I'm hoping that as those of you who are watching are reading that research, that you're taking note of that, because that's going to be an important piece to how you figure out what's the next step for my online community.
One of the things that the GovLab, it's almost a shame that it was Facebook that like was working with them, because it's like everyone hears Facebook and well, not everyone, but a lot of people will just turn off. I understand, right? Um, but they really did, I think, a really good job. GovLab did with the research that they put together. And one of the questions that they had, which I have to wonder if like how that was taken by the folks at Facebook who are hoping like scale bigger, 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 more people, more people. One of the things they brought up was, how big can a group really be that's sustainable where people feel like they belong? I thought that was really interesting that they included this whole bit about that, because sociologists have been saying for a long time that it's really a pretty limited circle that you can be a part of and still feel like you belong to that group. But in a world where it's like we need more members, more members, more members, you feel this push that you're not successful unless you have more. Like this interview isn't successful unless I have 1 million people watching. But is that true? Or is it more important that you have high quality? How long will that group last if you don't have quality interaction where people feel like they belong? What was your take on that? And actually, what are you thinking about that? Because now that we have all of these amazing tools that can help amplify this, and even with associations that are also hoping to reach their entire membership online, right? How can you look at how many people do you have engaged as a community manager? Um, how can you look at that and say we can effectively build a high quality community that is, thousands of people, tens of thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people large, and take care of it and actually make it an effective community?
Yeah. I think organizations get caught up in numbers, and I think that's just the nature of how they do business. Because of course you quantify success by the number of XYZ.
Yeah.
But I think that when it comes with engagement, I think that you can have a large community and have people be incredibly invested in it and incredibly and highly engaged. So for the community that I manage for PMI, there's a lot of people in it. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of people in it. But the engagement that we have there is monitored by our community governance. You have to have good community governance in order to ensure that those types of things can happen in a quality way. So I've got, an amazing team who is creating programming that allows people to, share their thoughts, share good quality content to help one another. Our community is architected in such a way that enables that. So I think that it can be large as long as there are processes and resources in place to support large communities. That said, large is not the goal. I think you
Mm,
have to go back to what the goal of your community is, why it exists, and who it's meant to serve, and figure out if it's meant to be big. Community by association is not meant to be a large community. It serves a very niche pocket of the community management industry. I am not expecting thousands and thousands of people to gather there, but the people that I am expecting to gather there, I want them to be able to feel like they can create content, they can talk to one another, they can help solve problems, they have input into what the community looks like as it goes into the future, because I think that's also important. You have to be able to take into account what your community members say is working and is not working, and act on that. So you can have a big community, but if you're not getting that feedback and you're not listening to what your community members are saying, in terms of what they need from your community, doesn't matter how big it is, right? Like you might as well just be standing up a community for a wall.
right.
So,
Yeah.
but to that I say, the goal should not be scale. Scale, that should not be the goal. The goal should be whatever it is your community why is, and that should be part of your strategy. And if that's not a part of your strategy, then you need to go back to square one and figure that out.
Yeah.
And then if it grows from there, then it grows from there. But that should not be your end goal. So I always tell people, if it's small, that's okay. um, if your goal is to grow it, why do you want to grow it, and who's meant to be there, and what are you what are you trying to do with that community? So you
Yeah.
have to answer some questions when you're really thinking about growth, before you can even think about why you want a whole bunch of people there. Because at the end of the day, vanity metrics don't tell
Yeah.
you anything except for the fact that there's more people there. But what are those people doing? How are they
What are they
engaging?
doing?
Is it valuable to them? And if it's
Yeah.
not, then that growth means nothing.
Well, so, we talked a little bit. This is, by the way, this link, if you're watching this, if you're listening to this, then I'm going to put the links in the show notes. If you're watching this, though, at the bottom of the screen, you'll see that I have this is the GovLab research link. If you want to go download that report, go download that report, check it out. There's also an executive summary that, if for no other reason than trying to figure out a good way to put together your executive summary PowerPoints in the future, you can download it for that. It's 14 slides. They look fantastic. You can go check that out. But, we covered their research. Let's talk a little bit more about the community by association research that you're doing, because you have some research that you're exploring too. And I was so excited to hear that you were doing this, because you have had a hand in reviewing, reading, collecting, analyzing research in the community field for a long, 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 long time. So I was just like, oh, this is beautiful that you're going to be pulling together research of your own. So talk to me a little bit about what it is that you're trying to find out through this research effort.
Yeah. So, community by association, as you stated, exists to serve association and community and nonprofit community managers and their organizations. But how can we do that if we don't know what the current state of community is like in those spaces? Are they being supported by executives? Or do they have budgets? Where do they sit within the organization? Do they have dedicated teams? So that's something that I'm really trying to baseline and understand is what's the basis? What's the seat upon which association and nonprofit communities sit? What's the current state of them? And we've got research out there that looks holistically at the state of the community, and that's through the Community Roundtable. But I want to really kind of zone in specifically on associations and nonprofits because, as I stated before, you've got some of these communities who are being managed by staff members who don't have community as their full-time role. Maybe they're a marketing coordinator, maybe they're a membership specialist, maybe they're a VP of communications. And there's a specific forum that I belong in, and every week someone's like, can someone tell me what platform I need to build my community? And I'm like, no, don't start there. Don't start there. Please don't start there. So, and then what happens is then these communities get scrapped because community didn't work.
Right.
Did community not work, or did you not build a strategy for it? And did your association not account for the fact that you need staff and that it needs a budget? And so there's all of this stuff that I want to make sure that I'm understanding. What does the landscape look like? What do association and nonprofit community practitioners need in order to ensure that their communities and their community programs are successful? And then what are organizations missing?
Right.
Is there a gap that needs to be filled that we're just not catching because it's such a niche part of the community management landscape? It's big, but it's niche. And I don't think we get to pull that information out a lot, or all the time. I know Community Roundtable tries to get it every year with their State of Community Management research, but I really would like to see if I can just make that the focus so that I can figure out what needs to happen next for these practitioners and these organizations to build successful communities.
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you're doing this. I'm so glad you're doing this. Luke says, and Luke, hi, Luke. Oh my gosh, why aren't you up here with us? Luke's an excellent community manager. He says, oh my God, please don't start there. He's talking about the technology. Don't start with the platform. Don't start with the platform. And then Reed was telling us earlier, hey, he's having raspberry zinger for the tea. For anybody who wasn't watching early, I asked, what kind of tea are you having? So Reed, I'm so glad that you're here. The technology, I feel like the technology, whether it's social media or any kind of communication, whether it's talking about community, you don't start with that. You want to start with what it is that you're using. Like, why are you doing this? What is it that you're trying to accomplish? And then figure out the platform later. People jump into that stuff so fast, and it's definitely not the place to start, for sure.
Yeah, they think it's a magic fix, and it's not. Like, if you haven't figured out why you're going to have community in the first place, no platform in the world's going to help it. And shout out to Luke, and also to Catherine, who really helped with coming up with some of the questions for the survey. I couldn't have done it without them. So
yay.
Thanks for your help.
Yay. Oh my gosh. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about mistakes. We talked about one of the big ones, which is, starting first with the platform. But what are some other mistakes that you're seeing associations make in regard to online community?
Not hiring a full-time community manager is another one. You need someone to manage that community. Standing up a community and expecting it to manage itself. That's one that's never going to fly. Even if you have a full-time community manager and you're like, thanks for being here, but we need you to do all this other stuff instead. The community is not going to take care of itself. There has to be someone there to orchestrate it. Strategizing for community long-term. Community is not something you can set and forget, and it's not a fix-all to engagement problems. Community is an enhancement to what the rest of your organization is doing, and it can create a lot of value if you strategize for it properly. Giving it a budget. Yes, it's a cost center. Associations, I'm sorry, it's a cost center. But if you allow it, if you strategize for it and you allow it to do some really great things, you're going to see that come back on the back end. So those are some big ones that I can think of just off of the top of my head, and not utilizing it. Sometimes I think what happens is you have an idea and you're like, yes, community, let's do it. Here's why it exists. Here's the people it's going to serve. We're going to set it up, but over there. and community is going to do its thing, and the rest of the organization is going to go off and do its thing, and we're going to still hold our events, and we're still going to have board meetings, and we're still going to do all this other stuff. In community, you can be over there and do your thing. And it has to be a part of normal business operations. It's not something that you set off to the side and let it just, have little community space and, that's cute. That we'll just set that over there. You have to incorporate it into the rest of the work that the organization is doing. Otherwise, why are you spending the money for it?
Oh,
Right?
yeah.
So.
Yeah. There's quite the discussion happening over here in our LinkedIn chat, which I have to say, great conversation going on. Questions back and forth about, can you actually do it without hiring a community manager? And mostly the responses being, yeah, no, not really. Yeah, not really. And actually, Luke had this really great response to Aaron earlier and said, yeah, not in my experience. You'll either need a staff person or a volunteer who's dedicated to herding the cats on some level. There was definitely some agreement on, you budget to market, not to build the tech. And Janet says, this is a good question. Should your community manager and content lead work together to help with keeping the community going forward?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Your community manager should not only be working with your content lead, they should be working with your marketing lead, they should be working with your membership department, they should be working with whoever they can work with in order to continue to drive value through the community. So, at the end of the day, every community has content. There's different content for the community, right? But they should absolutely be working together. Communities, a big part of communities is enablement. So if your community manager is working in a silo and not working with other parts of the organization, then you've got a big gap you need to fill.
Yeah, absolutely. I told you before we got started that I had more questions than I have even time for. So I knew going into this that it would be difficult. But I'm going to try to get some key ones in here that I think are really important for everyone to hear. And so what do you think are the traits of a strong and healthy community? Because we talked about what they're not. They're not necessarily the vanity metrics that people are looking for. X amount of, people who are members of that community, for example, because it doesn't speak to how many are engaged or anything like that. What are the traits of a healthy community?
I think a healthy community, you've got people helping one another, right? So, there's one of the things that we look at when we're talking about community health is speed to answer for questions. So if someone's answering a question or asking a question and, are you having to go in every time and, after 24 hours or, a couple of hours and answer that question because no one answered it? Or is your community coming in and providing different solutions for that question? Are they willing participants in the creation of content across your community? Are they sharing the content that's there across different platforms or with each other? Are they bringing people with them? Yes, new users is sort of a vanity metric, but it also indicates if how are people coming into your community. More importantly, are they returning? That's
Yeah,
the most important one for me is what does the return user rate look like? Are people referencing your community outside of your organization for the go-to place that they get their questions answered, right? And you can use sentiment analysis to find that type of stuff out if you have the ability to do so. When to listen in other places where people are having conversations about a specific topic. So, are they mentioning your community as their place where they get their needs met? Are they volunteering to do things like moderate?
right.
Are they volunteering to review content? Are they volunteering to help make the community better? And I think the biggest one is, are they providing you feedback? If your community is not providing you feedback, then how healthy is your community? Are people really there participating? Are they invested in the fact that this is a place I want to spend my time and I want to see it better? Are they willingly giving you feedback, and are you going to them and asking them for that feedback? And and are they being honest and open about it? So, some of those things are super, easy to look at, just through a dashboard and see, but some of those things aren't that easy to look at, and you have to be really paying close attention to understand whether or not your community is really healthy. And so
Mhm.
community managers should be not just looking at the numbers, but what are people saying? How are they interacting? What are they doing? What are the behaviors that your community is doing that really show you that either you've got a problem that you need to get ahead of, or you have a healthy community and people really enjoy being there.
I mean, I love things like the looking at what is actually coming out of the community as well. Like, are they sharing? Are they mentioning, like, I love this idea of the reference being something because, you know, um, I'll give you an example. Okay, so like think of your holy books that are out there, the Bible or something, and it's like some people check in on that every day. Some people, like me, maybe it's not every day, maybe it's every so often. But is it still something that you would say is a go-to resource? Is a very, like, sacred text? Not to say that maybe that's sacrilegious, I don't know, but not to say that that's a direct parallel to the community, but people can find value in something that they're not actually doing something in every single day. They might just know that they can go there. And the reason that they go there is because they trust what they see there. They trust that engagement. And that's the reason that they go. They might be using it for a different purpose than to actually do like daily engagement, which is not what a community manager necessarily wants to hear, but is still great, right? Because they're getting value out of it. There's an excellent conversation that's going on over in the chat. And Aaron said, hey, I asked the question about doing things without a community manager because there's some smaller associations staff wise who could really benefit from having community. But the pricing and the idea of having to hire someone keeps it out of reach. There has to be a solve for that so that they can access this great tool. Hashtag help the smallies. And then Luke had some ideas too, on how Aaron could approach this. But I like the idea of looking at volunteers and members and actually proving why they need to, maybe budget for that more in the future. Um, Absolutely. Just because you're not able to hire a community manager, which is not ideal, you could work towards that by probably creating some great strategy, finding some trustworthy, dedicated people who are volunteers who want to be a part of it. Maybe that's their skill set, maybe that's their talent. I don't know, Marjorie, what do you think?
Yeah, it certainly doesn't have to break the bank. The great thing about building community is that at the end of the day, people are interested in the best. For the most part, they're interested in what's best for the collective when it comes to community. So if they feel like it's something that they need and something that they want, and you're hearing that from people, both from a volunteer perspective and from your organization, then you can certainly say, listen, I know it's not ideal, but maybe we start on, I don't know, maybe we start on Facebook and we have a couple of volunteers who are early adopters who are willing to help us moderate it. And then as it grows, and then as we really figure out the strategy behind this, let's figure out what we need to do to bring it in-house and continue to nurture this community. So it doesn't have to be a heavy lift, but what you do have to do is make sure that you're strategizing for it correctly. You don't have to break the bank to do it. There are platforms out there that are amazing that do not cost, $50,000 just for implementation, and then $250,000 for a 2-year license. That you can, there's avenues and ways in which to do it that will not be taxing financially on an association. So just because you can't hire a full-time community manager doesn't mean you can't have someone keeping an eye on it full-time.
Yeah. Well said. So I realize that we don't have that much time left, and I still want to answer the question of the week. So what I'm going to do for those people who are listening to this and who I know are going to ask you the question that you always get asked, but you're saying don't start there. If people want to know your opinion on technology and they want to get your feedback, what's the way to slide into that conversation in a strategic way so that you're not, because I can imagine people would value very much your expert opinion, but don't want to get shut down completely. Am I wrong? Am I wrong about this? You guys can let me know out there if I'm right or wrong, but I think that that's a question that somebody listening or watching this would want to figure out. So what's the way to slide into that question with you?
Yeah, absolutely. If you can ask me directly, listen, I'd like to know your opinion about technology and platforms. And then my question to you would be that my response would be happy to have that conversation. Tell me a little bit about what you're trying to do with your community.
Yeah.
And so we can get to the technology piece once I understand what you're trying to do. Because at the end of the day, what you're trying to do is what's going to guide what technology you use in order to do it, versus I need technology to stand up a community and then trying to back into that. So, you can absolutely straight out ask me, tell me your opinion. And I'll be like, sure, let's have that conversation. What are you trying to do first?
So Luke says, community by association is a great example of a scrappy setup. # Queen Marjorie. So if you are reaching out, if somebody's reaching out, they can say, Queen Marjorie, this is the why behind my community. This is what we're trying to accomplish. And I would love to hear what your thoughts are about, and maybe have done a little bit of research and say like XYZ platforms, tell me what you think. And that might be, I'm winking to all of you who are watching. That might be the way to approach Marjorie with that question.
Yeah, because I'll absolutely have it with you, but I think that it's pretty much a moot point to have a conversation about technology if you don't know where your community is going, because the technology is not going to get you there, right? Yeah. You're not going to be able to stand up higher logic and be like, we've got it. That's not going to happen. It's so you've got to have some of that other stuff figured out first.
Well, so okay, I know 3 minutes. Oh, I'm out of my time to ask my questions. I wanted to ask you about the trends that you're seeing as far as where things are headed with online community. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think that it will continue to evolve. I think that we'll continue to see online communities stood up, not only for event support, but I think we'll see more niche communities stand up as well. I think that the community professional will segment a little bit because people have needs that need to be met that sometimes can't be met in a larger forum. So I think that we'll start to see that. I'm also, like I said, seeing event strategies really start to tie closer to community, which to me always felt like an obvious connection in terms of mapping value. But, we need to start and continue the conversation around, strategy, like really people thinking long-term about what does community mean for my organization, for me, how are we accounting for that, and not let it be something that is abandoned once that face-to-face interaction happens again, because there's a tremendous amount of value that comes out of online communities that can be tapped into, but we can't just use them because they are the need for the moment. They have to be the need for the long term as well.
All right. So the question of the week. Now, that I have been asking all of the people who come on the question of the week. And, this week let me bring it up. I actually prepared the banner for it so that I could bring it up that everyone could see it at the same time. What is an unusual habit or an absurd thing that you love? And these questions come, they're different every week in the online private community for association chat. And so, what's your answer to this question?
I am obsessed with stationery. I have notebooks everywhere. I buy pens like one day I think they will never exist again. It's pretty crazy. There are oftentimes packages will come to the house and the question I get is this another notebook? And I'm like, yes, it
Maybe.
is. So I absolutely love stationery. If anybody wants to know what to get me for my birthday, I will absolutely accept a beautiful notebook or a pen that glides nicely across the paper.
What do you have a favorite style, favorite type?
So I've been loving these sort of notebooks. I found these at a place called Paper Source, and they just have beautiful covers. Yeah. And the side tabs are colored so that you can have different kind of sections for stuff. And then, I like fine tipped gel pens. Those are my favorite as well. So
I love that. Now we know. So thank you so much for joining me today. I really genuinely, I could talk to you forever. And I'm so excited that you jumped on to talk with us and talk a little bit about the state of community. If people want to reach out to you, can they go ahead and reach out to you through communitybyassociation.com?
They can. They can find me at communitybyassociation.com. They can find me at email, which is marjorie@communitybyassociation.com. I am on Twitter at Marjorie A, which is Marjorie Ayyeee. And you can also find me on LinkedIn.
I love it. Thank you so much.
Oh,
I cut her off. I cut off Queen Marjorie. I cannot believe it. Okay, well, that was embarrassing. Thank you so much for joining me today and talking about the state of community. I don't know about you, but I learned so much. Every time I talk to Marjorie, I learn something more. And, the one thing I think that we can all agree on is that we are stronger when we're together. When we can come together, we are stronger. I do think over the past year, we've seen how that's been true. I think that as people come together in their online communities, they're seeing more and more the value of it when we can't get together in person as much. And so with that, I hope that you think a lot about what you heard today. I hope you reach out to Marjorie. I hope you follow her on Twitter. I hope you join Community by Association because she is amazing and she practices what she preaches. And I hope you continue to learn every day because, as Joseph Campbell once said, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. Have a great rest of the week, everyone.